Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncontested Investing. This is your host, Nate Zielinski, joined as always by my co-host, Suzanne Andreessen. Suzanne, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing terrific. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Today, Suzanne and I are going to wrap up the Building Your Team theme. So today's episode is going to be all about key legal and accounting roles for real estate investors. Why should you have attorneys? Why should you have accountants? How to vet them? Pitfalls to avoid. Suzanne and I are going to dive into it all, but we're first going to get started with the legal side of things, right? Why should you have a legal person on your team, an attorney in your back pocket as a real estate investor? What they're going to do for you from a legal perspective is protect assets, ensure the contracts are airtight. That's a big one. And they're going to advise on entity structuring and compliance, right? So the lawyer is always going to try to keep you on that straight and narrow path, keep you steady, make sure those I's are dotted and the T's are crossed.
Well, there's a lot of things. We know that local ordinances have a huge impact. So you want to make sure that you've got someone who's quite familiar with the neighborhood that you're sourcing the asset in, and making sure that you are meeting all the requirements that are set forth by that local municipality.
Yeah. And as a real estate investor, I'm sure our audience is well aware they have a lot on their plate when they're in this profession, right? So if you're trying to take care of the legal side of things while juggle everything going on in your portfolio, you're just asking for a disaster, right? So having somebody that you can trust, rely on, that knows all the ins and outs is a huge win for an investor, right? I think that weight off the shoulders is enough to hire an attorney alone.
Well, and it keeps you out of trouble. You know, we talked about having a pitfall. Really, the attorney is going to put the guardrails up for you and kind of keep you on the straight path, and that's really necessary, especially if you're a new investor. Make sure you have all of this in the forefront.
Yeah, and just because you're trying to do something, you're not trying to do something illegal, doesn't mean that you might be, right? There's so much to learn on the legal side of things. It can make an investor's head spin. So having that attorney is huge. As for the accountant or the CPA, right? They're going to help with tax strategy, bookkeeping, cash flow analysis, and the most important, overall financial health. So you really can't take for granted an accountant or a CPA that's willing to work with you as an investor.
Well, and it's more than just the numbers when it comes to an accountant and the CPA, and it actually combines some of the legal aspect of it as well. There's some states have different real estate tax requirements than others. Is this considered an investment property, and is there a premium for that? And that's something that you want to make sure that you understand with your attorney, but also with your accountant, on how you want to monetize that and how you can you pass through all of that taxation onto the resident moving into that property.
Yeah. And as a real estate investor, you're working to generate that passive income, generate that generational wealth. And without an attorney or an accountant, you might be forfeiting all those winnings, right? If you're not doing something by the books that an accountant or attorney can step in and help you with, you might end up paying for it in the long term.
And we have a significant episode on the horizon with Allison Tullio from Incentive Tax Services. She's exceptional on what she talks about, and it's going to give you some guidelines on how to really save some money as well.
Can't wait for you guys to watch that one. So as we move on to important traits for a real estate attorney, I think one of the things that's worth focusing on is the specialization, right? You mentioned it right when we started talking about this, Suzanne, but someone that focuses on real estate or business law, somebody that's dialed in, that's going to be an expert in the field that you're working in, is a huge win. Hiring a family friend that's an injury lawyer just because their retainer might be pretty cheap is a huge no-no, right? That's just one example, but you really want to do your research. We'll go over some vetting processes a little later in the episode, but really having someone that's main focus is real estate law is huge for an investor.
But even if you take a step back prior to that, you want to make sure, as you're setting up, are you an LLC? Are you a corporation? You want to make sure that you've selected the appropriate legal segmentation of the market on how you want to, and we've even had some people recommend having a separate LLC for every asset that you acquire. So that's just really where you need to understand that from your legal expert.
Yep. And that's straight from a lawyer. I remember that was episode with Talia Bashani for our true fans. That's going back a little ways, but it's things like that where they can come in and provide insight and information that you might not even thought of as an investor. So huge win. So experience with investors for real estate attorneys is another one. Residential or commercial, this is really going to depend on your strategy, right? Do you want to be on the residential side of things? Are you investing in commercial real estate? Are you doing a little bit of both? Finding the lawyer that aligns and knows the regulations for those types of properties, those types of buildings is huge to remember as well.
Well, and that is also going to be determined how you set up your leasing strategy. Is it a triple net lease as a commercial property? Are you completely walking away from the obligation of utilities and all those components, or is that something that's included in there? So those again are the pieces that you're going to, pursue and have a full understanding as you set those leases up, and your attorney should really be helping with that.
Yep. I think this is twofold here, but familiarity with the local and state regulations is a big one. So having a lawyer that is going to be well versed in the areas that you're investing in, right? If you're investing in properties across the country, don't look for an attorney that may be right down the street from you. Go to that market that you're investing in and do your research for the attorney there. And the second one, they should be proactive. The first conversation, a lawyer should be making sure, are you doing X, Y, and Z? Are you following these regulations? Things like that, right? Don't allow the lawyer to sit in the back seat. They should be the one grilling you. That's how you know you found the right attorney, because they don't want to be tied up in anything where their client may be breaking the law from day one. So if you have a proactive legal counsel, that's a huge win.
Well, and they're going to help guide you down the path. Is your house older than a certain age where you have potential lead paint? What do you need to do to protect yourself? Because there's so many things that could be facing you down the road that you don't want to find out after the fact that you didn't follow through in the beginning versus having to pay in the end.
Yep. And it finds a way into almost every episode, but networking is another huge one. If you're working with an attorney, typically attorneys like working with people that they can trust, people that they know are following the rules, following the laws, to put it mildly. But, lean on them, right? Do they have people that they work with, whether it's title companies, lenders, et cetera? Like, just always be asking what your attorney can do for you beyond just the following the laws and making sure that everything is on the straight and narrow. They can help even beyond that if you're willing to ask them. So next up is going to be what to look for in a CPA or an accountant. I think, again, it goes back to where we started the discussion with an attorney. Real estate investment experience. So not all CPAs or accountants are going to be well versed in the lingo, if you will, that it takes to be a real estate investor or to have conversations about money in the real estate industry. We're talking about depreciation, 1031 exchanges, cost segregation. There's a lot of things that your typical accountant or CPA might not be well versed in. That one that really specializes in real estate investments will certainly be.
And one of the most expensive annual components that you're going to have there are your real estate taxes. And they're making sure that they're fair and just is really what they're supposed to be. So, you have the right to challenge it. If you think that your property is overtaxed, there are avenues for you to pursue to have that considered from your local municipalities.
Yeah. And a strategic mindset for a CPA is a big thing to look out for as well. Much like the proactive legal counsel, are they going to create a plan for your money? Right? They're not reactive. They're not just doing what you tell them as a real estate investor. Are they coming up with solutions? Are they providing ideas? Now, as a real estate investor, you don't have to say yes to everyone, right? You need to do what's best for you. You need to be comfortable with making these decisions, but having a CPA that's willing to do that work and say, hey, I ran some numbers, look at these different modules. That's someone that you want to work with long-term, because they are trying to make money with your money, right? They're trying to accelerate that process for you.
Well, and there's pieces, there's legal write-offs from a taxation perspective, but also making recommendations on what to do with your overage if you have any, which is a great thing. But how best should you invest that? Whether it's in the stock market or another parcel, they can help you with your buying strategies. Now's the time to consider another asset. This asset's underperforming, maybe you should sell it. So these are the conversations that you should be having with your accountant.
And I think 3 important questions to ask for every accountant or CPA that you're looking to hire as a real estate investor. You're talking about passive versus active income, the capital gain strategies that maybe can be employed with some of the money that you're making, and then expense tracking system. So not only focusing on how to make more money, but how is your money being spent? How are you tracking that? What does that look like? Because that's how you're going to ensure that you have a healthy bottom line, right? If you're just focused on what the profit looks like, then you're forgetting about all the things that you have to spend your money on as an investor, and you're not getting the complete picture. So always be making sure that you and your CPA are on the same page regarding those questions.
And there's, various levels of depreciation on how you're writing that off and how you're taking that over time. And so you want to make sure that you understand this at the very onset. What is your plan? Are you holding it for 7 years? Are you holding it for 10 years? Are you holding it for an undetermined amount of time? Figure those pieces out really before you acquire it and know what your game plan is.
Mhm. And Suzanne, our goal for investors is to give them the keys, give them the game plan, make it as easy as possible. So what we're going to do next is go through a list of questions to ask during the vetting process to make sure that you're working with the right attorney, making sure that you're working with the right account. I think the first one is, how many real estate investors do you currently work with? If you're asking this for an attorney, that's how you're getting a gauge of how comfortable they are in this arena as it pertains to their career as a lawyer, right? How many do they work with? Do they have experience? How did those relationships go? If they worked with a few in the past, is like what happened with those relationships? If they're working with 3 or 4 currently, I think that's the green light. That's a really good sign that they have active, healthy relationships with real estate investors.
And even seeing, have their clients given them testimonials. Can you have a
Yeah.
conversation? That's an appropriate thing to ask for. Hey, do you mind if I talk to one of your other investors? I love to hear what they've done differently. That may help me in my acquisition plan. And I think that's a very valid conversation to have with somebody.
Yeah, my dad's favorite quote: Google it. The internet is your friend, right? So obviously these face-to-face conversations with the potential lawyer are huge, but what are people saying about them online? Always look for those reviews. Don't look for one positive one or one negative one, right? Anybody that had a bad experience or good experience can leave a review. Try to find one with multiple reviews that kind of back up what one person may be saying, and then go from there. What is your experience with purchase and sales agreements, lease negotiations, and land use issues? So this is getting into the real nitty gritty, the weeds, right? This is gonna how you're gonna be able to determine if this lawyer is an expert or not. Maybe they're just in the field, or are they an expert? So these are important questions that investors are going to face on a weekly basis, and you want to be able to see if your lawyer is on their toes, on top of everything, and if they're understanding the questions that you're asking them.
Well, and understanding the lease and all the components to it. If a lease is broken, what do you have to keep yourself whole?
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that you have? How do you protect holding over? Are they staying beyond their time from that? And how is the premium? How are the lease increases? It's all written in there to protect the tenant as well as you as the landlord. It's important to have it all clear and written out.
Yeah, and this is an important question too coming up next. Some people need to understand the distinction here, right? Because you have lawyers that litigate or lawyers that only do transactional work. So that's the difference between, are you able to get in a courtroom with me and defend me on my behalf? Or is it just, am I paying you for advice and strategies and what to do in these situations? So if you want to go to the extent to have a lawyer that's going to be able to sit right next to you in a courtroom, should your real estate investment career ever get to that point, obviously that's kind of thinking
Hopefully
worst case
not,
scenario, but you wouldn't be the first real
Yes.
estate investor to be in a courtroom. We'll put it like that, right?
And probably
So
not the last.
exactly. So, thinking ahead, right? What do I need this lawyer for? If it gets to that point, are they going to be comfortable stepping into that courtroom? That's a huge question. And then, do you have flat fees or hourly billing? Understand how much you're going to be charging this attorney is huge. So again, when you're talking about, this is a question for your accountant, right? But how much are you spending? Where are you spending it? Figuring out how much and when you're spending on your attorney is big, because they are not cheap.
Well, and sometimes, don't be short-sighted when you're looking, for, it's not a horrible thing to have a one-man team as your legal counsel, but sometimes having a firm it may cost a little bit more on the forefront, but that they have your back on either scenario. So they have a litigation department, they have maybe a tax department, they've got all components. So sometimes as you're pursuing your legal counsel and your accounting, find out what other divisions they have or other people they have within their own firm that can support your entire package of strategy.
Yep. As an investor too, the onus is on you there to look at your budget. How much can I spend on an attorney? I think for the beginners, having that one-man legal team, like you mentioned, is probably the most feasible option. But if you're a serial investor with 15, 20, 25 properties in your portfolio, having a firm at your disposal with that quick response time, getting somebody on the phone, maybe even at night, maybe even during the weekend, is huge for an investor, because at that point, it only gets amplified, the potential that can go wrong when you have that many properties. So keep that in mind as your investment career and journey proceeds. As we move on to the vetting process for accountants, again, the first question you're going to ask them is experience with real estate tax law. So again, similar to the lawyer questions that you're asking, specifically in real estate. What can you do? How can you help me? What does your experience look like? How many years have you been doing this? Questions like that to really get a feel for how much of an expert they are and in the kind of person that you're hiring is big for investors.
Well, and also, it's a state by state variable. I know that the state of South Carolina views second homes at a premium from a taxation perspective. And so if you're in multiple states, you want to understand, how that's taxed and how you bring that into your P&L statement, because it has an impact on it. And you want to make sure that you have the capacity to cover that, and that your rent request that you're putting out on the market is a doable rate. That's something people are willing to pay.
Yep. Similar questions would be, how do you handle bookkeeping or just tax filings? And then how do you help clients plan for tax season throughout the year, right? So for an investor, you got to be thinking about that almost every day of the year. I think for the normal person, they just take 1 or 2 days out of their year around April, late March, they file their taxes and they forget about it for another year. As for an investor, they're thinking about that constantly, right? Every decision they make gets affected by how much is going to be taxed. There's a lot of implications. So having that accountant or CPA that's always thinking about that throughout the year and kind of helping you walk through those implications on every decision is a must for investors, I would think.
Well, isn't that what the shoebox is for, to put all your receipts in? Well, but that, you want to really figure out, how are you going to do that? How are you going to account for all your things? You want to make sure that and if there's more to, you've got quarterly taxes. And then, if you have employees, some states now have, a mandatory 1% for a family leave act. So what are the things that are you doing everything properly that you're not going to get short at the end of the year? And then what is the accounting platform that you think you should be using? And, certainly ask your accountant, what are you most comfortable with? Hopefully it's something that you're comfortable with as the investor. And you want to make sure you keep track of all your expenses, and how it's been, how it's accounted, how it's set to each asset. If you have multiple assets, you want to make sure that you're balancing it properly.
Yep. And don't be afraid to ask. You mentioned like software systems or dashboards. Can you show me what that looks like? Just, meet for coffee, give them a run through. What does everything look like? Because obviously they're the expert. You're paying them for a reason. But for you as the investor, you need to be able to understand that, have at least a little bit of a grasp when it comes to that, just so you're not in the dark and they're just managing your money without you having any responsibility. So don't be afraid to ask. And then, if that's a question that they kind of pull back and say, I don't want to show you my back end solutions or systems, that's an instant red flag. And, should be maybe looking for someone else to partner with.
Well, and you want to make sure that whatever you have that you're comfortable with and knowledge, that either they can integrate it into what they have, or they're willing to teach you and maybe perhaps provide you the access to it as well. It has to be a team effort. And you need to be able to, it's a lot of money on all sides of the fence.
Yes.
So you want to make sure that it's managed properly.
Yes. You're not just handing over the keys to your real estate empire, right? You're definitely on the back end, following along, helping make decisions, giving your input when you need it. Those are huge for an investor to not forget about. So for key legal accounting roles for real estate investors, Suzanne and I, we're off to a great start. We're going to take our first break of the episode. We'll be back with some pitfalls to avoid when looking for attorneys and accountants, and we'll wrap this episode up. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you on the other side.
See you soon.
REI Inc. is the premier monthly publication for real estate investors. Dive into a wealth of expert insight and strategies from industry leaders and gain valuable regional market insights, ensuring you always have the best information at your fingertips. Visit rei-ink.com to elevate your real estate investment game today.
Welcome back to this week's episode of Uncontested Investing, where Suzanne and I are wrapping up the Building Your Team theme. And today, Suzanne, we've had a great conversation so far about key legal and accounting roles for real estate investors. Where we are in our episode path is avoiding the pitfalls, right? So mistakes that all investors should avoid. We've talked about this already during the episode, but choosing a generalist who doesn't understand real estate. So again, this is an important point to hammer home, but it's both for the attorney and the accountant. It's finding somebody with experience already in this field. This is your life. This is your livelihood. This is your career, your financial freedom, right? So this is not something to take for granted and not something to hire a family friend on. Hire somebody that's maybe just getting into the industry. You want years of experience. You want reviews that you can count on and trust. Don't hire someone that's not serious about real estate tax law or real estate legal anything, right?
Well, and you want to make sure that they keep you on track. You have quarterly taxes that you have to pay. Even having that, a review with your attorney and making it say, hey, these are the things I'm looking at. I'm considering this type of property. What are your thoughts? Get some feedback. I mean, they're your partner. And that's how you should really look at them, as a partner, your accounting partner and your legal partner. And, ask them for input, ask them, how should I structure this? Should I, and making sure, should this be an LLC? And all these pieces,
Yep.
you need to understand what you're looking for and ask for their advice. And if it's different than what you were thinking, ask why.
Yep.
It's okay to challenge their thought.
Exactly.
They hopefully know more than you, because that's why you hired them. And that's really where you want to seek their advice.
One of the big things for investors is you have to be comfortable with hiring these people, right? Don't just do it because we're telling you to on a podcast. Go through the vetting process, find the one that works for you. The first one you find may not be the one that's the right fit for you. So go through that process, go through trial and error, and find the best one that's going to set you up for long-term success.
And don't wait to the last minute to do it.
Yep.
You should be doing this in the advance of every asset that you acquire. But and the flip side of that is, as you just start to dispose of these, make sure you're going about that the right way as well. You want to find out the legal way to dispose of it. You also want to find out, what are the accounting things that you need to be paying close attention to, so that you don't owe more taxes or have done something that you haven't, accounted for, that all of a sudden your ROI becomes negative.
Yes. I imagine one of the mistakes that the newer investor can potentially make is hiring these professionals when it's too late, right? You want to do it before you even secure your first deal. The last thing you want to do is realize, I might be in trouble here. I got to call a lawyer.
I bought that the wrong way.
Already having a lawyer in place, already having an accountant in place will prevent you from making those mistakes. And you know what? Sometimes they're bound to happen. So having one that you've already vetted, that's on speed dial, that you can trust, is a time saver and a money saver for an investor. And it's something that you need to have before that first deal gets signed on.
Well, and overpaying for services as well are just as important. You want to make sure that you've spoken to several potential partners in these strategies, but also talk to some of the other folks that are in your in your real estate neighborhood, per se, your investments clubs and stuff like that. What do you pay for your account? What do you pay for your legal fees? What are the things that you've seen? And a lot of these folks, even though you're in theory in competition for them and on the acquisition side, they all understand helping you out. No one wants to see anybody fail, because the real estate investment as a whole, the industry and the arena, they want it to be successful. Yes. So everyone's here to help you.
That's perfect. And it goes back to networking. I think those are the people that you want to ask first, right? Not only about dollar amount, but if they can have specific recommendations. Who has worked with you? Who do you feel comfortable recommending me? I'm just looking to get into it and I'm not sure where to start. Do you have any advice for me? Questions like that for your local real estate network is huge.
Sure. And, and how did they set up? Are you an LLC? Are you an S corporation? How did you, and why did you make that decision?
Yeah.
It's one thing to know that, but how did they come to that conclusion? Yeah. It'll help you make the right one as well.
And I think to take it a step further, the professionals that you're looking to hire might already be at these local meetups, right? So don't just always be on the phone or via email with some of your real estate connections. Go to these local meetups, go to the local RIAs, go to trade shows, check out social media. LinkedIn is a huge one. Instagram is another one where lawyers and accountants are definitely getting their brand out there and kind of showcasing their skills for investors. So throughout the vetting process, are they on social media? Are they posting on LinkedIn? Are they writing educational content? Are they crafting educational videos? Things like that is a huge green flag, huge light bulb moment. And that's when you should be sending off that DM. Do you have 15, 20 minutes to talk with me? I'm a newer investor and I could really use some help as it pertains to accounting or legal counsel. They should be happy to set up a time to talk to you and get that conversation started.
And these are going to be the ones that actually help you write your contracts for acquisition as well. So they're behind the scene, giving you legal counsel on your company, but each contract that comes through that you're writing should also go to them. They're going to, make sure that the title's clean, make sure that all the pitfalls that we kind of touched on in the beginning, you want to find them before you sign on the dotted line. And if you missed one, you want to also address it as soon as possible. Don't be afraid to acknowledge there was a mistake made and ask then, what is the best way for me to get out of this?
I think interviewing at least 2 to 3 potential professionals that could join your real estate team is a good rule of thumb. And then look for professionals. I think adding this question in could be savvy as well. Do you invest in real estate as well? So if you have an accountant or a lawyer that's also investing in real estate, that just goes to show that they'll go the extra mile. They're invested in it as well. You could get advice from them in real estate, not only as it pertains to the legal side of things or the accounting side of things, right? If they're having trouble on a property, or if they just secured a new one, or there's potential to partner in the future, that's another feather in the cap for acquiring them and having them be a part of your team.
Well, and tax laws are constantly changing. They change every year. Ask them, well, what do you think should be my top priorities? And ask you, same thing with your attorney. What should be my top priority as I enter into this phase? And they should be able to give you very clear and confident advice for you to follow.
Yeah. Let them in, show them that you want them to actually be a business partner and not just somebody that you hire for a service. That can be a true key to long-term success for that business relationship. Scheduling regular check-ins, as you mentioned, with the quarterly taxes. You should be talking to your CPA all the time, certainly more than once a year, maybe even more than once a month. Just always regular check-ins. Where am I at right now? How aggressive can I be with my next property? Things like that. And then keep the communication open. Always give them multiple lines of communication, whether that's a work and a cell number, an email address, connect on social media if that's the best way to do it. And then find what the best way to communicate with them is. Do they prefer to be texted? Are they in meetings a lot and they can't always pick up the phone? Are they always on their computer nonstop and checking email throughout the day? So finding that best way to be in contact with them is huge, because when these things come up, you need to act fast. So wasting time on phone tag or unread text messages is a huge no-no, right? You want to get to the root of the problem and work on solving it. You don't want to wait for them to reply, and vice versa. So those are huge keys for keeping these relationships healthy and having long-term success with a lawyer or an accountant.
And don't be afraid to ask for guidance at any point during this time frame, whether it's doing your payroll, anything. And if you're adding in something or maybe you want to make a change, ask in front of that. Don't make it and then ask. It's like permission versus forgiveness. You want to find out really in advance of that. Do you think I should do this? Why? Yes or no? And what should I be looking out for as I pursue these new changes?
So there you have it. We've completed the course for key legal and accounting roles for real estate investors. Thank you so much for joining us today. Suzanne and I had a blast going through the ins and outs of everything that you should know as an investor before making these extremely crucial decisions that have a massive impact on the rest of your real estate career.
Don't find the pitfall.
Exactly. Avoid them at all costs, and we'll catch you same time, same studio next week. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of Uncontested Investing. We will see you next time.
See you soon.
Thank you for listening to Uncontested Investing. Questions about today's episode or the podcast? Email podcast@rcncapital.com and make sure to follow REI Inc. magazine on LinkedIn and Facebook, and RCN Capital on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. See you all next time.